This next article says, let's see what it says here. The Counterfeit Intellectual, Jordan Peterson, a masterclass in charlatanism. Wow, that's a scathing article there. So there exists a particular phenomenon in the intellectual landscape of our time. A man who hides behind the armor of credentials while spouting nonsense with the conviction of Moses descending from the mountain. Jordan Peterson, that professor emeritus of psychology at the University of Toronto, has mastered the art of rhetorical sleight of hand, dazzling the credulous with the bombastic verbiage, while the discerning observer witnesses nothing but a carnival barker hawking pseudo-intellectual snake oil. So let's not mince words here. The man, to put it in terms that would likely send him scrambling for his thesaurus, he is full of shit. This self-appointed messiah to disaffected young men has began his meteoric rise by lying. Yes, lying. About Bill C-16, a modest piece of Canadian legislation that simply added gender identity to existing anti-discrimination laws. Peterson, with the dramatism of a third-rate Shakespearean actor, declared he would rather starve himself in prison than comply with imaginary pronoun police that existed only in the fever dreams of his increasingly baroque paranoia. Legal experts universally condemn this interpretation of nonsense, yet his followers, desperate for a champion against the phantom menace of postmodern neo-Marxism, they all lapped it up like kittens at a saucer of milk. The the carnivore carnival, his dietary delusions. Perhaps nowhere is Peterson intellectually more a charlatan than nakedly exposed than his evangelical promotion of the so-called carnivore diet, an absurdly nutritional regimen that would make even the most committed Paleolithic revivalist blush with embarrassment. I eat beef and salt and water, and that's it, and I never cheat, ever, he proclaimed on Joe Rogan's podcast once, with all the zealotry of a man experiencing a religious conversion rather than a nutritional change. According to the Gospel of Peterson, this miraculous meat only diet cured his depression, anxiety, gastric reflux, snoring, gum disease, psoriasis. One half expects of him to claim that he restored his virginity and taught his pet lobster to recite, you know, Chopin. Any qualified nutritionist, those inconvenient experts with actual knowledge, would tell you this dietary approach lacks scientific support. It defies basic nutrition science. It potentially endangers those foolish enough to follow it. But why let evidence intrude upon a good story? Peterson, the ever clinical psychologist, naturally feels qualified to dispense nutritional advice with the certainty of someone who has never encountered the concept of uh, the good old fashioned randomized control trial. The man speaks with a convention of Moses at Sinai while peddling advice that wouldn't pass muster in a high school health class. He's a fascist as well, with his dog whistles and authoritarian tendencies. His flirtation with far-right talking points reveals the hollowness of the core of what he's supposed to believe in is classical liberalism. His incessant railing against postmodernism and cultural Marxism, the latter term having deeply problematic roots in literal Nazi propaganda, provides just enough plausible deniability when sending clear signals to the darkest corners of the internet. His work has been enthusiastically embraced by the alt-right, not because they've misunderstood him, but because they hear exactly what he's saying. The man who claims to stand for individual rights has called for the creation of the website identifying postmodern neo-Marxist professors and courses, and students can avoid them. A blacklist is a blacklist by any other name, would smell as foul. Such calls for punitive measures against ideological opponents reveal the authoritarian instincts lurking beneath the veneer of intellectual freedom. His fans might object to the characterization of him having a fascist sympathies, but the saying goes, if 9 people sit down with one fascist for dinner without objection, you have 10 fascists at the table. Peterson may not be goose-stepping through Toronto, but he's certainly willing to break bread with those who flirt with such ideologies. And his climate confusion and scientific illiteracy. There is no such thing as climate, Peterson declared on Joe Rogan's podcast, a statement so breathtakingly ignorant it would make a freshman science student cringe in vicarious embarrassment. His climate denialism extends to false claims about fracking that uh, never happened, polluting water supplies, a statement that has been contradicted by mountains of scientific evidence. It is quite bad. This is a man who claims ancient people could literally see their DNA through the use of hallucinogens. One wonders if Peterson has been partaking in such substances himself, or does he make up nonsense when his spirit moves him? And of course, the misogynists lament. Peterson's regressive views on gender are wrapped up in the pseudoscientific veneer as well, the same veneer that characterizes all of his worst intellectual offenses. His suggestion that enforced monogamy would cure incel violence and not merely wrong, but dangerously so, proposing that women's bodies and choices should be constrained to pacify violent men. It's the kind of reasoning that belongs in a dusty 19th century tome, not in 21st century. His claim that women would be happier if they just surrender to motherhood is contradicted by actual research on female happiness. But why let the data interfere with telling women what to do and what their proper place is? Peterson possesses the remarkable ability to speak with complete confidence about what would make half the human population happy, despite being neither a woman nor a researcher who has published any peer review work on female happiness. So, what you have is the intellectual fraudster's playbook. What emerges from what we're examining here is Peterson's career is not merely just a pattern of errors, but a systematic method of intellectual fraud. First, obtain a legitimate credential in one or more fields. Secondly, leverage those credentials to speak with unearned authority on everything from climate science to ancient mythology, law to diet. Third, when challenged by actual experts, retreat behind a fog of verbosity and victimhood. Fourth, selectively quote critical reviews to create the impression of approval, as documented by the misleading quotes on his book covers that present a more favorable impression of than his original critics intended. Fifth, when all else fails, claim to have been misunderstood while changing absolutely nothing about your rhetoric. The College of Psychologists of Ontario apparently reached their limit with Peterson's antics, requiring him to undergo social media training due to concerns about the impact of his inflammatory public commentary on the professor's reputations. One imagines the training was about as effective as teaching table manners to a honey badger. Peterson's masterful ability to present himself as both the victim and the victor, persecuted truth teller and triumphant sage, would almost be as admirable performance art if it weren't doing actual harm. His misrepresentations of transgender issues have fueled hostility towards an already marginalized community. His climate denialism contributes to public confusion on existential threats. His dietary evangelism could lead vulnerable people into abandoned effective treatments for serious conditions. And behind the Jungian references and the Nietzschean pretension stands a man who has found that being provocative is more profitable than being precise, that confidence trumps competence in the marketplace of ideas. Peterson has discovered what every second-rate intellectual with a book sell eventually learns. In the culture wars, there are lucrative niche for anyone willing to tell certain demographics that their prejudices are actually profound insights, that their resentments are righteous, and that the experts who disagree are corrupt conspirators in some vast ideological plot. So the tragedy is not merely that Peterson is wrong so often about so much, it's that he has squandered whatever genuine insights that he might have as a clinician on the altar of celebrity and controversy. The man who tells others to clean your room has made a career of intellectual slovenliness. If Jordan Peterson represents merely another voice in the cacophony of public intellectuals, his failures might be of little consequence, but his influence, particularly over young men seeking guidance in confusing times, makes his intellectual dishonesty a matter of public concern. His followers deserve better than a father figure who cannot and will not distinguish between fact and fiction, between expertise and opinion, and between careful thought and careless provocation. In an age where truth struggles for oxygen, in an atmosphere of alternative facts, Peterson has not been a part of the solution, he has been a part of the problem, a contributor to the chaos rather than the clarity, hiding behind academic credentials while abandoning the academic rigor. And the most damning indictment of Peterson is not that he's wrong. We're all wrong sometimes, but he seems to be constitutionally incapable of admitting when he's wrong. That's not the mark of a serious thinker, but of a man that's more committed to his brand than the truth. There is a word for such person, and it's not intellectual. It is a charlatan.